Want to see gobs of paint disappear off these 100-year-old schoolhouse doors? Keep watching. When we first bought the school 2 years ago to turn it into our house, I knew that this undertaking was going to be a never-ending stream of projects. One of the first projects I started working on since moving back to Indiana from the East Coast has been refinishing and restoring all the original doors from the school. We also got some extra doors for the new rooms we're building. When we bought the school, all the doors inside were painted with many layers of paint. I've learned how to strip and refinish furniture from my dad, who is an incredible teacher. He's also not on social media and will probably never hear the nice things I'm about to say about him. My dad has a deep knowledge of refinishing because his parents used to own an antique shop and a furniture refinishing business down in Mitchell, Indiana. We couldn't have them rolling in their graves about these gorgeous 100-year-old solid wood doors covered in paint, so it had to go. The upper level of our school was 4 large classrooms, 2 pale rooms where the kids kept their coats and lunch, and an entry with 12 doors. Because we're adding kid rooms, closets, and bathrooms, we actually needed to acquire some more doors to make the layout work. We wanted to honor the school's history with the design choices we're making, and we thought that adding a bunch of new doors would look a bit odd. So we sourced 6 doors from an old Catholic school here in Indianapolis, and we found 5 more gigantic doors from an old school outside of Philadelphia while we were living there. Just for this round of construction on the upper level of the school, I've been working on restoring 23 doors in total. It's been a lot. The problem with sourcing old doors is they're a lot of work to refurbish, but they're so worth it in the end. And if you like projects, it's also incredibly satisfying. I am so excited to be sharing this video because I've been working on this project since the summer, over 5 months now. Here's how I stripped and refinished all these doors. I started by getting the doors in one spot, and I took off all the hardware and nails and odd things that were adhered to them. Then I got stripping. I used and experimented with pretty much all the products I could find. For the doors with light varnish and thin layers of paint, I used Kwikstrip, Citristrip, and any of the faster products that you can get at the hardware store. For the doors that had multiple layers of paint, I used Sherwin Williams Smart Strip. This product is made for things with newer paints like latex and acrylic. It's thick, and it usually took off the paint in one strip session, which was awesome. The Smart Strip needs to sit on the doors for many hours, and you can't let it dry out. You can use saran wrap or old newspapers or the special paper they sell to seal the stripper and let it do its work. And then comes the satisfying stuff, the peeling. Also, just one note, there's another product out there called Peel Away that's meant for pre-1980 paints and lead-based paints, but luckily I didn't have to deal with that because I tested each of the doors before stripping them to be sure. If you want a full list of the products with links, check the blog posts in the description. Step 2, scraping and repairs. After I let the stripper do its work, I would scrape off all the chemicals I could and dispose of them. Then, if there was some stubborn paint or varnish in the corners and cracks, I'd also use a pressure washer to do a final clean. I wouldn't use a pressure washer on doors with veneer because it can be pretty intense on the wood, but most of my doors were solid wood and they were already pretty damaged, so I planned to do a huge sanding session anyway. In this step, I also did a ton of repairs on the doors. Many of them had to be glued in multiple spots due to general wonkiness or splits. We also redid the veneer on one of the old Catholic school doors to cover up multiple deadbolt holes. Redoing veneer is super annoying. 2 for 10, do not recommend. Step 3, sanding. After stripping and repairing the doors, I got to sanding. This is probably the most time-consuming step of all, but it's pretty mindless and satisfying. For the tools I use, this is where it comes in handy that my dad and brother are serious woodworkers. A couple years ago, they bought this incredible Festool sander, which kind of blew my mind. It's got a HEPA vac attached to the sanding heads, and it's incredible because there's no dust. Literally, I could have sanded this in the house, and it would have been okay. The thing that drove me the most crazy while sanding were the fiddly bits on the trim. I did use a couple hacks to sand these. One tool I kept going to was the trusty old Sandiflex that attaches to a drill. I also bought, off the recommendation from TikTok, these spongy attachments for the Festool from a place called Surf Prep. Both these tools I liked a lot, but neither were a magic bullet when it came to sanding trim. A couple months later, and some final passes with 220 grit paper, all of my doors were prepped and ready for stain. Step 4 was staining. Okay, this step I love. I started by prepping my doors with Minwax's pre-stain wood conditioner. The pre-stain isn't completely necessary, but it penetrates the grain of the wood to help you get uniform acceptance of the stain. Because these doors are huge, I used this to make sure that I got the most uniform stain look possible. Then I used Minwax's honey or the provincial stains on all of these doors. There's a variety of wood in here, and they all accepted the color a bit differently, but I'm so delighted in getting this step done. One incredible product discovery I found were these blend-all sticks that help you hide any blemishes in the wood after you've stained your project. I had to use some wood filler in different spots, and these sticks help disguise those spots incredibly well. You basically shade in the grain of the wood over the filler and smudge it to make it look more natural. And then once you lacquer, you'll never be able to tell that there used to be a huge chunk of wood missing. Step 5 is lacquer. This was a huge step. I ended up using 6 gallons of Sherwin Williams Sherwood lacquer. This is my first time using this lacquer, and I was super impressed by it because it didn't clog the sprayer quickly, and there weren't that many drips that I had to sand out. This step again was boosted by my dad's amazing tools. I used his Apollo sprayer and spray gun. This setup is pretty expensive if you buy it new, but my dad got his at an auction for a couple $100. Setting up all the doors to spray was one of the moments where I thought my dad was a total genius. We turned the barn into a full spray booth of sorts and attached the doors to the barn beams with a bunch of wire and some drywall screws in the top. This way it created an assembly line of sorts to spray all of the doors in a row instead of the stopping and starting that would come with doing them in small batches. And so for a couple weeks, I put on the 6 layers of lacquer on all the doors. Between each session, I would sand out any drips until the doors were as perfect as 100-year-old school doors could be. This was a lot of work, but just look at the difference. Next, I'm going to put on all the flat hardware and wrap up all the doors to get them ready to be installed in the schoolhouse. I still need to source some new glass for some of the doors, and I need to cut to size some of the old slate chalkboards that I got off Facebook Marketplace from an old high school in Odin, Indiana for the big Philadelphia doors. All of that will be installed in the doors once they're actually in the school, so we won't break the stuff. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching this crazy journey we're on, and stay tuned for more projects and construction updates as we turn this old school into our house.